piece of garbage out there. It's part 3 of What If Naruto Was an Outsider. Uh, I guess let's just get into it. I don't really feel like saying anything else. There's not really anything I have to address, so yeah. Anyhow, I stared down at my gloved hands as I thought about what to do next. For the last 14 days, I have been training with Danzo and his Anbu root force in basic combat and assassination skills. They've drilled into my head everything that I would ever need to know when it comes to defending myself. If my cover was ever blown during a mission, however, if I was discovered by an opposing shinobi, they said that my likelihood of survival was slim to none. The root Anbu have been used to The root Anbu have become used to my appearance near Danzo and even began showing signs of acceptance within their group. Gripping my hands closed in the room across the hall, paranoia was a sense that would keep me alive. T1. Oh, Trainer 1 once said as she sent a kick that smashed into my back, making me stumble forward to the ground. Trainer 1, or T1 or Trainer 1, was the person that trained me in combat and self-awareness, while the latter aspect didn't need much training. My combat skills was fairly subpar when it came to their standards. Sure, I knew how to fight against someone fairly. This stemmed from my days of tireless training in martial arts, but I needed to learn so much more than that to stay alive. In her eyes, she said that if I would ever need to utilize anything she has taught me, then my mission was already a failure. I wasn't fighting people in hand-to-hand combat to kill them. I wasn't fighting people in hand-to-hand combat to kill them. I would be utilizing various means to kill my target silently as discreet as possible. This is where Trainer 2 picked up this aspect of my training. Trainer 2 T2 or Trainer 2 obviously was training me in the aspect of situational awareness and how to use poisons to my advantage. As I went through a mission, there would be various ways to kill a target that could be utilized by the environment around them. Either by killing the target with the environment itself, or by using it to gain access to an area otherwise unrecognizable. T2 has been running me through trials to help me identify those new routes that would otherwise remain unseen. The poison aspect of his training was easy, though. Simply study the books provided and pass his test, or I would have to take a small dosage if I didn't. I never failed. Danzo was personally teaching me about the various known guilds for assassins and bounty hunters within the shinobi world. Every village, every town, every fishing hamlet had a market for the service that I now provided. The trick was locating it and determining if the price was appropriate for the transaction. Even here in Konoha, there was a secondary market for the death of others that Danzo did not personally control, but dabbled in from time to time when the use of his root Anbu would be too blatant. He suggested that when not doing missions for him, to seek out the logical guild for extra money if I felt inclined to do so. Every lesson, however, would end with me killing someone by order of Danzo himself. Every day someone would be brought in to die at my hands, and every day I found it becoming easier and easier to do it. At first, they were just like that. They were just like the first strapped to a chair and knocked out, but now I was cornering them and watching their eyes as I ended their life. Some portion of the numbing that came after every kill remained each time until I felt nearly nothing at all when killing. The begging and pleading that came up to my ears simply drowned out until their voices were simply unrecognizable. My training was costing me a piece of myself, and I knew that with each death, each time I returned to the warehouse, that I was turning into something that would make my family puke. I knew this, but it needed to be done, not for my sake, but the missions, these tumors, needed to be dealt with, and if turning into a monster was the answer, then so be it. Once my daily training with Danzo was complete, I would sneak off to the deserted Uchiha district to train my powers. Speed and precision was what I trained in, and how much could be used until it fully drained me. I needed to increase my endurance if I wanted to fight other shinobi, because without the powers of my mark provided, I would be useless in a fight that dragged on for too long. To this end, the mark provided much needed strength and agility, not to the point that made me a shinobi, but my physical strength was extremely high. My body continued to adjust to the mark, and if this kept up, then I'm sure I would surpass many Chunin level shinobi when it came to reflexes. I knew that I wouldn't keep up with them in raw strength, so by applying much of this power to reflexes and agility, I'm hoping that I can outsmart them rather than overpower them in any one single department. A knock at the door quickly made me jump to my feet in preparation for what was to come. "Naruto, are you awake?" I called myself as I shook my head. It was only Yui. "Barely," I responded through the door. It was nearly 9 in the morning, and I had to meet Danzo for today's training in an hour. "I know this might sound weird, but I've noticed that you haven't been going to school lately." Was she spying on me? No. She doesn't know what's going on. But evidently she's noticed my change in attitude. I've severely distanced myself from Minato and Yui, and my drastic change in personality, or lack thereof, has apparently been noticed by my sister. Minato has, for the time being, been unaware of this, simply happy that my run-in with the CCC has been quietly averted. School has also been averted as well. I was going to graduate from my school no matter what, simply based on my grades. Leading up to that point, I could fail all my finals and still pass with an average grade, but knowing not my teachers, they'll pass me because of who my father was. Not that it mattered at this point. Avoiding school was probably for the best. Is everything okay? You can always talk to me if there's something on your mind. I opened the door and looked into her eyes, making her flinch at the action. The cold eyes of someone who has heard enough stared back at her. "I'm fine, Yui," I responded as I stared her down. "Are you sure? Because I can..." "Yui." My sister couldn't look me in the eye as she looked around at everything that wasn't me. "Go on your mission and enjoy your life. Enjoy the life of a shinobi. Is this not about not being able to use chakra? Naruto, you know that I've never held that against you." But she wasn't able to finish her sentence as I moved past her, roughly shoving her aside as I moved down the hallway. "Hey, asshole, I was trying to be nice." "Don't be. I never asked for your pity, and I never will," I said as I flipped my hood over my head, but a firm hand was placed on my shoulder. "No, we're going to talk about what the hell has gotten over you. Right here, right now," Yui shouted, refusing to let go of my shoulder. "Ever since you randomly got the day off from school, you've changed. You don't eat with us. You don't talk to us. Hell, you barely recognize our existence." "Let go of me," I said, clear annoyance in my voice, but my twins seemed to not have heard me. "And now you're skipping school? What the hell has come over you?" Yui shouted, now extremely angry with me. "I said let go," I shouted, finally breaking my emotionless visage, shoving her hand away from my shoulder before my fist smashed into her face, making Yui stumble backwards into the wall. Her eyes reflected that of shock of what had just occurred. Her brother had just hit her. "You stay out of my life. Do you understand me, you spoiled brat?" She stared back into my furious eyes in complete shock. Never has she seen her brother so angry before. Had she pushed him too far? Without another word, I left the house. My training was going to start soon, and I refused to be late. Scene change. There you are. I was wondering when you would arrive, Danzo said as I approached the warehouse. This was the first time Danzo has met me outside of the building since the first day he brought me here. I furrowed a brow in question at his abnormal behavior, and Danzo noticed my unsaid question. Wondering why I have met you out here. I nodded my head. My two root members have held you in high praise as of late. They seem to think you're ready to begin your first mission. Sorry. If you believe it to be so, I replied with a bow. Very good. Here is the information containing your target. You have until midnight to complete it and turn in the mission, or it will be considered a failure. Understood? Danzo asked, the overcast skies becoming darker with each passing moment. Understood, I replied, still in a bowed state. If that is all, I bid you farewell, but if you would need a word of advice, Danzo said as two Root appeared next to him, one being a black-haired woman that brought me into the CCC at the very beginning. I would recommend a change of clothing. That school uniform that you normally wear may attract unwanted attention. After this, Danzo disappeared along with the Root Anbu, leaving only a scroll where he once stood. Leaning down and grabbing the scroll, I tucked it away into my jacket pocket and moved away from the scene, so a change of clothes was part of his orders. I could use a new jacket or something of the sort. As I moved through the streets, I would come across several shinobi laughing and talking about their various missions. Groups of genin with their Jonin sensei went to and fro, completing their D-ranked missions. No, where was it? I thought as I walked down the street in the heart of the village. There it is. In front of me was the place where I bought the gloves from a few weeks ago. Opening the door, the same man, Aki, if I remember correctly, could be seen flipping through the pages of a different magazine. He gave me a glance before returning his gaze to the magazine. Welcome to our armory. If you need anything, let me know, Aki said, but he clearly didn't want to be bothered. Disregarding his statement, I moved to the clothing section once more. His daughter must be out on a mission or something, because she probably would have been out here scolding her father for being so passive. As I moved down the line of clothing, nothing seemed to catch my eye. These clothes would be the material that I wear as I killed another for profit. It would be part of me just as much as my name was it passed down. Just as much as my name was as it passed down through the underbelly of the village. Having trouble finding something, looking to the counter at the other end of the store, Aki was looking at me with curious eyes. It was the first time he expressed interest in anything other than the magazine in front of him. I simply stared back at the closed. I simply stared back as he closed the magazine and hopped down from his seat behind the counter. Follow me. I may have something that will perk your interest, Aki said as he moved towards the back room. Deciding to follow the man, I pushed the flaps back that covered one of the doors behind the counter. Shelves upon shelves of old clothing. The stacks of clothes, shelves upon shelves of old clothing. The stacks of clothes moving towards appeared before me, but a small pathway weaved itself around the stacks of clothes moving towards the back of the room. Aki was seen opening up a dark wooden chest that sat against the wall. Once opened, he pulled out a black jacket with silver linings that went down to my knees. It had a hood that would easily cover my eyes from sight, which could be useful in the correct situation. It was made by my grandfather when I was your age, Aki said as he looked over it with a slight amount of pride. The jacket is made from a material that resists fire to a certain point. He then threw it to me, who caught it, and looked it over. You take it, won't do it much good just collecting dust in this old box. How much? It also has this muffler, if you want it to, Aki said as he threw a black muffler/scarf over his shoulder, making me awkwardly catch it. there are several seals within it. It should act as a filter. It should act as filters against any airborne pathogens or poisons. No chakra need to be applied to the scarf. But how much? If that is all you can leave, you'd be doing me a favor if you took these things off my hands. Only bad memories linger with those old scraps, Aki said as he moved by me towards the front, leaving me puzzled in the back room. Was that his way of being nice? Placing the jacket over my body, I found that the jacket felt cozy, almost as if it was accepting me as its owner. After doing so, I stuck my mission scroll into my pocket and the muffler in the other before making my way towards the front of the store. Aki looked over at me once I emerged into the storefront, but looked back down at his magazine once he saw what he was looking for. Whatever you do, don't tell my daughter about this. Don't feel like getting an earful about it later. I nodded my hooded head before leaving the store with my new clothes wrapped around my body. While I appreciated the kind gesture, I can't help but think that Aki gave me these clothes for a separate reason. Shaking my head, I looked down the busy street to see a small tea house at the corner of two crossing roads. A steady rain had begun to fall as I entered the shop. Good a place as any, I thought as I weaved through the crowd and into the business. Booths lined the walls, while wooden tables sat in the center of the room. Nearly every table was full except for one of the booths, which I quickly made my way over to and took for myself. "What would you like, mister?" a female waiter asked, clearly in a hurry to drop off the tea on the tray in her hand to another table. "The house green, please," I responded, making her rush away to deliver the drinks to another table. With that out of the way, I removed the scroll from my jacket pocket and looked over the gray outer parchment. So this is my mission. Whoever is listed inside the scroll will be dead by midnight. "Here you go, honey. If you need anything else, just let me know," the waiter said as he dropped off the large cup of tea and disappeared once more. Disregarding her for the time being, I opened the scroll and began reading who would be my first official kill as a servant of Danzo. I quickly ran through the contents of the scroll. A man named Kirito Sato, owner and master of a local dojo. He is currently located at the southern part of the village, with only small details about his past still within. I rolled the scroll up and placed it within my jacket. I drank the rest of the tea and left some money on the table before leaving the tea shop with one person on my mind: Kirito Sato. Scene change. Yui, Sakura said as she waved her hand in front of her teammate's eyes. The blonde blinked before looking to the pink-haired girl. "Wake up. We're about to start our second mission." The four were currently walking down the street away from the Hokage Tower towards their next mission, which was to find a certain black cat. "Sorry, Sakura." Yui shook her head in an attempt to remove the disturbing thoughts from her head. "What's gotten into you? You've been kind of down all day today," Sakura asked. Saya and Kakashi were also quickly listening to the conversation as well, because they too have noticed their normally bubbly teammates' depressed state. Ryui remained quiet for a minute as she thought of what to say. "Sakura, do you ever think of what life would be without Sakura, do you ever think about what life would be like without being able to use chakra?" Sakura and Saya looked at one another in confusion, but Kakashi frowned beneath his mask. "Not really. Why do you ask? It's just my brother. He's been very distant." "Did something happen?" Sakura asked, concern in her voice. Yui sighed as she rubbed the back of her head. "Naruto and I had a fight this morning. I tried asking him why he was avoiding Minato and I so much, but Yui frowned at the memory of what happened before. Frowned at the memory of what had happened. "He hit me and left. I've never seen him so angry before." "Naruto punched you?" Sakura shouted, clearly angry by Yui's words. "Where is he now? I'm going to." "Did he say why he did it?" Kakashi asked, cutting off his fuming student. "I brought up how he couldn't use chakra and how nobody holds it against him. Yui's frowned, deepened somewhat by her own words. I don't know, I just feel so bad for him. Yui, he punched you when you were trying to be nice. You have nothing to feel sorry about, Sakura said as she smiled at her teammate. Thanks, Sakura, Yui said as she smiled somewhat, but Kakashi remained silent. Saya had decided to ignore her teammate's family drama for good reasons as well. No need to jolt in on her rival's personal problems. Scene change. Why are you here? I asked to a shady figure in an alleyway on the southern part of town. It was growing darker by the second, and I wanted to complete my mission early for my own reasons. Down the street was a dojo with a sign hanging from its outer gate. It looked like a miniature clan compound, except there was only a single building within. The street was fairly busy. The street was fairly busy since the dojo sat on the main street leading from the front gate to the Hokage Tower. But after some recon, I mapped an escape route out of the back of the building and into the maze of alleyways and small streets beyond. A heavy rain fell from the heavens, giving me the perfect cover to infiltrate the dojo. I came to collect once the mission is completed, the shady figure responded in that even and empty tone that I know so well. Did Danzo send you to watch over me? I questioned, aggravated that he may not trust me to go through with the killing of a random person. Our master did not send me to watch over you, only to collect the head of Kirito Sato. It was Trainer one of the people that trained me for the past 2 weeks. Your master, just because he's helping me doesn't mean that I'm one of his servants, I replied as Trainer 1 slightly came into view. She had a black ponytail running down her midsection and a white mask. She was also one of the people that initially brought me into the CCC for questioning. And just because he holds you in high regards doesn't mean you can disown his orders, Trainer 1 said in a threatening manner. Yes, you may not be completely under his control, but for now you must take orders like the rest of us. I furrowed a brow at her words. Out of all the root members I've talked to, Trainer 1 was one of the few that actually expressed a small amount of personality. What this meant, I had no idea, but for now I had a mission to complete. Noted, I said as I turned and left the alleyway. Disappearing into the crowd of people, I pulled the hood tighter around my head as I moved towards the dojo. Scene change. Alright, children. Everyone did a fantastic job. Keep improving at this pace, and you'll surpass me someday, Kirito said with a massive smile. He had black hair and eyes with a lean physique. His age must have been late 20s, early 30s. The 7 glowing children smiled at his kind words. Like that will ever happen, one of the girls replied as he walked to the door with the kids. Of course it will. Just remember that what I taught you one day will come to pass, Kirito said as he shuffled the girl's hair. I assume he meant ruffled. The 7 children bid him farewell as they walked towards the small gate at the other end of his even smaller front lawn. Closing the gate behind them, Kirito immediately frowned and took on a hard visage. I know you're there. Come out, assassin. Inside the dojo, a shadow dropped from the ceiling to clean the wooden floor below. You are not like the others that have been sent to kill me. Who are you? Kirito Sato, local swordmaster of a personal dojo in the village of the Hidden Leaves. Works hard for the betterment of his students and community, the cloaked man said as he walked towards the wall of a room where weapons of all sorts hung from pegs. A nice collection of weapons. Surely you're more than just a swordsman. Thank you, but you seem a little young for killing, Kirito said as he moved towards the opposite end of the room while trying his best to see underneath the hood. A black scarf was covering his face, leaving a dark slit between the hood and the scarf. Maybe, the boy replied as he ran his hand over one of the weapons. How did you come upon these magnificent weapons? Some of these are very rare. Kirito's eyes narrowed at his words. So you know, weapons trafficker, mercenary, a murderer. You've got quite the reputation, Kirito Hayashi. A lot of people from the outside village want to see you dead. I'm not looking for redemption. I did what I did because I wanted to protect my loved ones, and I'd do it again if I had to, Kirito said, staring the cloaked boy down as he kept circling the room opposite of him, who continued to appreciate the weaponry on display around the room. And don't try to preach to me what is right and what's wrong. You're here to kill me for profit, nothing more. Very true. The money on your head is large, but my motives are much different than your average bounty hunters. The man stopped at a particular weapon as Kirito grabbed a black sword from the wall. I certainly hope so. For a child to want to kill another, he almost didn't want to fight killing a child. It hurt his soul to even think about it. But he knew that this world was cruel. What is this weapon? The boy asked. The boy picked up the weapon and expertly began analyzing it. The hilt was the same length as the blade and much thicker than a normal sword. The blade was curved, but bladed on each side. The length of the blade was the same length as his forearm, making the total length of the weapon about the size of his arm. In fact, every weapon in this dojo had a name behind it. What those names were, however, eluded him. A sword. The cloaked boy looked at him while he had grown a second head. I suppose I asked for that, he replied as he gave the weapon a once-over before moving opposite of Kirito. That's not yours, and it's not yours either. Kirito seemed to get angry at his words as he readied himself for the attack that was sure to come. Before you die, can I ask you a question? Furrowing his brows, Kirito looked confused as he began walking towards him with confidence. You know I was coming, didn't you? A small amount of shock appeared in his eyes, confirming the question. I see. Thank you. I never answered. Kirito never got the chance to finish as the cloaked boy dashed towards him at a surprisingly fast speed. The swordsman began blocking and dodging each attack that came his way, but never found an opportunity to break the onslaught. Finally, finding an opportunity, Kirito shoved the assassin back with his shoulder. You're very skilled with the blade, but your stance is flawed. You weren't trained very well, were you? Not like this. I was trained in a different way, the boy replied as he relaxed himself, but Kirito remained guarded. And what was that? The boy laughed and shook his head. Come at me and you'll see. Gripping onto his sword tightly, Kirito dashed towards his foe, but he remained unmoving, simply watched as he closed in on him, ready to strike him down. As his sword was about to make contact, however, a breeze could be felt pressing against him. Discounting it as just a random hapstance, Kirito brought his sword down onto his would-be killer. Never moving a muscle, the black-garbed boy simply watched his supposed death fall down upon him. Is he accepting his death? Kirito thought, but before he could think of anything else, an audible clink came to his ears. His eyes widened as Kirito's sword was deflected from nothing but air. Taking a step backwards, Kirito once again began his assault, but only for each and every one of his attacks to be blocked by wind blades. Appearing out of nowhere, as Kirito went in for another attack, a shimmering in the air forced him to backpedal. A shallow slice across his chest made blood drip onto his white robes. I see, you're beginning to understand, the boy said, as Kirito pressed his hand to his chest to help clot the bleeding. The wound wasn't serious, but even still. You're able to form the air around you into blades, to which you can block and attack people at will. A truly remarkable ability, but one that would categorize you as a shinobi. After seeing that without the knowledge I hold, I would also come to the same conclusion. Are you saying you aren't a shinobi? That I am. Then how are you using jutsu? Because I made a deal with the devil. Kirito looked confused and shocked by the statement, so the boy felt obligated to continue. I made a deal so I could become powerful, to be able to kill others for my own selfish reasons. The boy looked down at the blade in his hand, almost saddened at how his life has evolved up until this point. Sometimes we have to make hard choices that leave scars that don't always heal correctly. I'm sorry that someone so young has had to make such decisions. It is what it is. Now come, show me the extent of your swordsmanship. Kirito obliged, dashing towards the black-garbed boy with his sword at his side. Bringing his sword up, he blocked the first air blade before quickly moving towards his target. But the boy seemed to see what he was attempting to do and began backing up. Will you continue to run? Your wind blades, while impressive, lack strength, Kirito said in annoyance as he blocked 3 more attacks. If more strength is what you wish. It was then that the boy began moving his arms, physically directing the blades down onto the swordsman. Kirito immediately felt the difference as the wind blades that made contact with the sword pressed much harder than before. Jumping backwards as to recuperate himself, sweat trickled from his forehead into the spotless floor below. So if he is physically direct, the blades they become stronger. If he does, then, Kirito thought, but it would seem his assassin wouldn't give him much time to think as he dashed towards him after punching the air in front of him. A single torrent of air shot towards him, with 100 miniature blades swirling within this torrent of wind. Forced to jump to the side, Kirito's blade met his opponent's as a struggle for dominance ensued. You just made a mistake getting this close to me. Did I? The boy responded, making the older swordsman look around quickly. A shimmer to his right made him kick the assassin away and jump backwards. Then he saw an immense pain erupted in his shoulder. Looking over, he saw that his arm was gone. You perceived that I can only make one blade at a time. A fatal flaw in your plan, unfortunately. I'll kill you. I won't die like this. I can't die like this. Not by some little street rat with some wind jutsu. Kirito shouted as he grasped onto the hole left by his arm. You want to see the full extent of my power? Let me demonstrate. Before Kirito could react, a searing pain coursed through his chest. Kirito coughed and looked down to see the blade that was once in the hand of his assassin piercing through his chest. Oh, no, the blade that was once in the hand of his assassin, piercing through his chest. The swordsman looked back up to see that the blunt-garbed boy had disappeared from where he once was. His vision began to blur before finally falling over, blood pooling onto the otherwise spotless wooden floor. Standing behind him was the dark figure from before. With the blade in hand, the boy motioned with his hand to create a blade of air and swiftly chopped off his head. Dropping the sword to the ground next to Kirito, he pulled out a brown bag and quickly placed the head into said bag before disappearing from the building. Scene change. You warned him that I was coming, I said in irritation as I shoved the brown bag into inner one's arms. I did, she responded as she placed the head into the preservation skull and into her pouch. Why? I had a plan to kill him without ever having to actually fight him, I responded. We were in a dark alley from before, but this time, near complete darkness shrouded us. The rain had begun to slow down to the point that it was only a slight mist lingered in the air. It wouldn't be long until the rain completely left, because Danzo-sama doesn't like weak subordinates, so I warned him to see if you were ready to serve Lord Danzo. It was a test to see if you were capable of fighting against some of the strongest people that aren't shinobi, and you passed, and if I failed, then you'd die. Trainer 1 placed a wallet into my hands before folding up a single sign. I don't know how you killed him, but I was instructed to tell you, good job, if you weren't killed. With that, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Looking into the wallet, I noticed a large amount of money and quickly stashed it away within the confines of my jacket before leaving the alley. Some form of law and enforcement will descend upon the dojo sooner or later, and I would rather not be here when they do. Once I was far enough away, my body finally began to relax, and once it did, an audible rumble began to shake in my stomach. Even after killing someone, I can still easily eat. Looks like I'm getting used to this, I thought as I began looking down the busy street for a nice place to get some food. This money wasn't going to spend itself. Finding a nice barbecue restaurant, I pushed the flaps back and pulled my scarf down so people could see my mouth. A woman stood behind a pedestal, sorting through some papers. How can I help you? Table for one, please, preferably by a window if at all possible. Sure thing. Follow me, please. We moved through the crowded restaurant at a brisk pace. At the while, I took note of the layout of this building. The restaurant had 3 rows of hallways with booths lining both sides. Each booth could hold up to 8 people, except for a few near the back of the building, which were able to seat 2 or 4. A grill was built into the center of the tables, so you could cook your own food at your leisure. Will this work? Thank you, I replied as I sat down into the two-person booth. The two-person booth. A small window next to me allowed the cool evening breeze to flow into my booth and press against my face. The sounds of people walking and conversing outside on the bustling street was almost cathartic. God, I'm so illiterate, man, I swear. To my otherwise dull mind, emotions were hard for me to push forth, but for some reason I felt almost at complete ease at this very moment. Choji, you know we have to pay for all of this. A voice exclaimed from the booth across the small hall, breaking my brief moment of tranquility. What? Isn't this all you can eat, right? What? Isn't this all you can eat night? Looking over, I saw a group of 4 shinobi, 3 genin and 1 chonin, seated around the large tables. Empty plates were stacked as high as their heads. I knew who they were. From the description of my sister, Team 10, or the Inoshikacho group, or Inoshikacho trio, are one of the teams that came into fruition when they all graduated the same year. I've met and talked to Shikamaru several times before, and he seemed like a nice person, a bit lazy to a fault. No, you knucklehead. They never did that, Ino shouted in annoyance. The Jonin looked slightly annoyed as well, while Shikamaru looked bored. It's not my fault their food is so good, especially their spicy pork, Choji replied in delight as he took another bite of the food being grilled before them. What will you have? My attention was pulled away from the spectacle into the water, and I thought of what I wanted, as I took my scarf off and placed it next to me. I'll take the spicy pork. 1 order of spicy pork coming right up, the waiter responded before leaving to place the order. So you like spicy pork as well? My concealed eyes were turning to the loud group across the hall from me. Choji was brimming with delight when he heard my order. You must have amazing taste. Thanks, I responded in a dull tone, but it was nicer than normal, although I doubt they could tell the difference, but I was trying to be slightly friendlier to them because they are my sister's friends, even though we weren't on the best of terms at the moment. Making more enemies was not a wise idea. Leave him alone, Choji. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that likes to talk, Ino said. That's nonsense. Anyone who likes spicy pork has to be a nice guy, Choji said, just as bright as before. Shikamaru continued, watching me with curious eyes. Even still, you shouldn't bother someone that's clearly tired, Asuma said, as he roughly messed up Choji's hair. Now we have to figure out where you're going to get the money to pay the part of the bill. But I thought it was, Choji went to say, but was pulled down the hallway by Asuma. It doesn't matter. Let's go talk to the clerk, shall we? Asuma said as he dragged the crying Choji down the hallway. Why me of all people? Ino muttered to herself as she followed the duo down the hallway, furrowing a brow. I wanted to move to the front of the restaurant and engage in conversation with the clerk. Silence soon followed. Well, the silence of a normal busy restaurant. During this time, the waiter stopped by and placed the raw meat and vegetables in front of me, along with the glass of water. After lighting the grill, the waiter left to another booth that called her over for one issue or another. I placed a few pieces of meat and vegetables under the grill, the satisfying sizzle from the meat only making me hungrier. Do you always linger behind when the rest of your team leaves? I voiced as I continued cooking the food. Sometimes I like to enjoy the peace and quiet every once in a while. Shikamaru responded as he ate one of the pieces of meat left over after Choji's destruction. Lets me clear my head and think a little. I didn't respond, instead opting to continue cooking my food in silence and listening to the sound of the street. Your voice. I've heard it somewhere before, haven't I? Shikamaru asked, peering over to me for any sort of reaction, but I never moved. But when I think this, I can't believe it. So cold and distant. You couldn't possibly be the person I'm thinking you are. Shikamaru, let's go. We're about to leave, Ino shouted from down the hall. The boy sighed and stood up from the booth before walking away, but before he was out of earshot, he stopped. Sorry to bother you. You just reminded me of an old friend, is all. With that, he left the restaurant with the rest of his teams, leaving me deep in thought. So even people that knew me can't recognize my voice. Lifting a piece of meat from the grill, I plumped it into my mouth, savoring its taste. I swallowed the delicious morsel to quell the rumbling in my stomach. I suppose it's better this way. Scene change. Oh. Well, that's the end of part 3 of What If Naruto Was an Outsider. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, that's nice. If you didn't, well, I don't care. I'll see you all next time, whenever that might be. I'm about to go make some wonton soup. Later, y'all.